Before diving into this story, I feel the need to share a truth. Life rarely unfolds as we imagine. The people who enter our lives often challenge societal expectations, and we sometimes find ourselves grappling with emotions we never thought possible. This was my reality. Looking back, I'm not proud of my actions, yet they've undeniably shaped the person I am today. I never anticipated how a single decision could unravel a storm of secrets, confusion, and guilt. To make matters more complicated, it involved someone I could never openly express my feelings for my younger brother. Let me clarify before assumptions arise. I grew up in a family that wasn't particularly close. We were polite, yes, but warmth was a rarity. Ethan, my brother, was 5 years younger, and for most of our lives, we existed in separate worlds. While I was navigating the hurdles of high school, he was engrossed in cartoons. By the time I was off to college, Ethan was just beginning the awkward phases of his teenage years. But everything shifted after I returned home following graduation. The shy, awkward boy I once knew had transformed into someone extraordinary, intelligent, kind, and unexpectedly charming. At first, I questioned my own perceptions. How could I feel such a connection to someone I had practically helped raise? Yet, the feeling was undeniable, powerful, and unyielding. One calm evening, under a sky full of stars, we sat in the backyard sharing our thoughts. The conversation started innocently, weaving through childhood memories and laughing over silly antics. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan said something that left me momentarily speechless. His words carried an unfamiliar weight, and while I tried to dismiss them as mere sentimentality, they lingered between us like an unspoken truth. That night became a turning point, and though I tried to ignore the emotions brewing within, they refused to be suppressed, altering our relationship in ways I could never have anticipated. In the weeks that followed, our connection grew more complicated. I buried myself in distractions, job applications, outings with friends, anything to keep my mind occupied. Yet Ethan was always around, finding excuses to be near me. He'd linger in the kitchen while I cooked, drop by my room to chat, or sit a little too close during TV sessions. At first, I convinced myself I was overanalyzing things after all. Siblings are supposed to be close. But this was different. The tension between us was unmistakable, an invisible thread pulling us closer despite my efforts to resist it. The breaking point came on a stormy Sunday afternoon. Trapped indoors by relentless rain, Ethan suggested we play a card game, something we hadn't done since childhood. I joked, trying to keep things light, but as the game progressed, I couldn't ignore the shift in our interactions. Every glance lingered too long. Every touch carried an unspoken meaning. When our hands brushed while reaching for the deck, the air between us seemed to crackle. For a moment, time froze, and I saw the same emotions reflected in his eyes that I was struggling to suppress. "You feel it too, don't you?" he whispered, breaking the silence. I tried to deflect, to deny what was happening, but my words felt hollow. Ethan, however, wasn't ready to let it go. He followed me as I fled to another room, pleading with me not to dismiss what we both felt. I insisted we couldn't continue this way, that it wasn't right, but even as I said it, I knew the damage had been done. From that day on, everything changed. We avoided directly addressing what had happened, but the tension was always there, simmering beneath the surface. Every shared glance, every conversation, even our silences were charged with unspoken feelings. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but normal no longer existed for us. Spending time with Ethan filled me with guilt, as though I were walking a tightrope over an emotional chasm, one wrong step away from disaster. Yet, pulling away from him felt just as painful, like tearing out a piece of myself. Ethan, however, made it nearly impossible to keep my distance. He found ways to be close, offering to run errands, suggesting movies to watch, or simply sitting in my room while I worked. Deep down, I didn't want him to stop. One quiet evening, as rain pattered softly against the windows, we sat watching a romantic drama neither of us was really paying attention to. The room was dimly lit, the atmosphere serene, yet charged. Without thinking, I rested my head on his shoulder. It was such a small, innocent gesture, yet it felt like crossing a line we had both been tiptoeing around. Ethan stayed still but finally broke the silence. "You're making this really hard," he whispered. I tried to play dumb, pretending I didn't understand, but we both knew the truth. "This," he said, gesturing between us. I pulled away, shaking my head, insisting there was no us. But even as I spoke, the words rang hollow. "Why does it feel like there is?" Ethan pressed, his words cutting through the silence. I found myself unable to answer, the weight of his gaze bearing down on me. Instead, I stood abruptly, muttering something about being tired before retreating to my room. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. Moments later, a soft knock echoed against the door. "Ethan," I called out hesitantly, my voice laced with uncertainty. "I'm really not in the mood right now." His reply was firm, yet gentle. "It's important." Before I could protest, he stepped inside, quietly closing the door behind him. We stood in silence, the air heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Ethan broke it, his voice steady but earnest. "I don't care what anyone else thinks. I care about what you think about how you feel." His words made my breath hitch. "I can't do this, Ethan," I said, my voice trembling as emotion threatened to overtake me. "It's not just about us. There are consequences, our family, our lives, everything we've built together. It's not fair." "Fairness doesn't matter," he countered, stepping closer. "I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I just need you to be honest. Do you feel it too?" His question lingered in the air, demanding an answer I wasn't ready to give. I stood frozen, paralyzed by the enormity of what he was asking. Admitting the truth would change everything, shatter the fragile facade we'd both clung to. Yet how much longer could I deceive him or myself? My heart pounded wildly as my mind screamed at me to shut this down, to walk away. "Ethan," I began, my voice cracking, I don't know." "That's not an answer," he replied gently, his eyes searching mine, pleading for honesty. In that moment, I felt utterly exposed, vulnerable under his gaze. The truth was undeniable, I did feel it. Every shared moment, every lingering glance, every whispered conversation had taken on a deeper meaning. But how could I admit to something so forbidden, so impossible? I can't do this, I murmured, turning my gaze away from him. You already are, he said softly, closing the gap between us. I turned away, desperate to create distance, but he followed, his voice breaking as he spoke. Please, he implored, just be honest with me. I need to know I'm not losing my mind. I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was imagining things, but the words caught in my throat. The silence between us grew heavier, oppressive, until I could no longer bear it. I don't know what I feel, I whispered finally, my voice barely audible. But whatever this is, it can't happen. It's not right. Ethan stood still, his face a mix of sorrow and understanding. I won't pressure you, he said softly, his tone filled with quiet resignation. But I need you to know how I feel. With that, he turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the turmoil in my chest. The following days blurred together as I threw myself into work and any distraction I could find. But no matter how much I tried, Ethan was always on my mind. He didn't make it easier, either bringing me coffee in the mornings, sitting beside me at dinner, and finding reasons to stay close. Every touch, every glance, every interaction felt like a test, as though he were waiting for me to give him some kind of sign. Then, one evening I found the notebook. It was lying on the coffee table, unassuming at first glance. At first I thought it was mine, but upon opening it, I realized it belonged to Ethan. The pages were filled with sketches, notes, and bits of poetry, creative outlets I never knew he had. But one page near the end stopped me cold. His words, written in raw, unguarded honesty, were about me. Not as a sister, but as someone he admired deeply, someone he couldn't stop thinking about. Each sentence felt like a revelation and a weight, dragging me deeper into a reality I had been trying to avoid. I should have closed the journal, walked away, and pretended I hadn't seen it, but I couldn't. His words echoed the emotions I had been suppressing for weeks. That journal was a turning point. It gave form to feelings I had tried to ignore. By the time morning came, I couldn't face him. I spent the day avoiding him, but Ethan, persistent as ever, was waiting for me in the backyard that evening. You've been quiet all day, he said softly as I joined him. I've just been thinking, I replied, trying to sound casual. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. About what? I hesitated, my fingers nervously twisting the hem of my sweater. I found your journal, I admitted finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence fell between us, and for a moment I thought he might deny it. But instead he sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. I didn't want you to see that, he said quietly. I know, I replied, but I did, and now I don't know what to think. About what? He pressed gently, his voice tinged with both fear and hope. About us, I said, turning to face him. The vulnerability in his eyes mirrored the chaos inside me, and I knew in that moment that everything had changed. I don't want to complicate things for you, Ethan began softly, his voice filled with hesitation. But I can't deny how I feel anymore. I've tried, and it's useless. My voice wavered as I replied, I don't know if I can handle this, Ethan. It's overwhelming, it's so tangled. Gently he reached out, his hand brushing against mine. It doesn't have to be, he insisted. We don't need to have all the answers right now. I just need to know if you feel the same. I wanted to deny it, to convince him this was all a misunderstanding, that we could somehow return to the way things were. But the truth was undeniable. Yes, I whispered, the word barely escaping my lips, but that doesn't make it right. My confession unleashed a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and I tread carefully, tiptoeing around our feelings. We never fully crossed the line, but neither did we distance ourselves. Every interaction, every glance, every word felt like navigating a fragile tightrope, one misstep away from a devastating fall. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, and the house was silent under the cover of darkness. Restless and unable to sleep, I found myself in the kitchen, absently staring out the window. Ethan entered quietly, his presence filling the space. "You're still awake," he observed, reaching for a glass of water. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper as my eyes flicked to his and quickly darted away. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with unspoken words. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He placed the glass on the counter and turned to face me. "We need to talk," he said finally. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "About this," he gestured between us, his tone resolute. "I can't keep pretending everything is okay when it's not. I need to know where we stand." I took a shaky breath. "I don't know," I admitted sincerely. "I don't know what to do." Every part of me screamed that this was wrong, but I couldn't deny the emotion swirling inside me. "Then stop fighting," he urged, stepping closer. "I can't," I whispered, the words barely audible. "It's too overwhelming, too risky." He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "Let me make it simple," he said. "Do you want me to walk away? If that's what you need, I'll leave and never bring this up again. But if you want me to stay," his ultimatum hung in the air, leaving me speechless. He was offering me an escape, but was that truly what I wanted? My heart pounded as I stood at a crossroads, knowing that whichever path I chose, there would be no turning back. "Ethan," I began, my voice trembling, "I don't want to lose you, but I don't know how we can make this work without tearing everything apart." His face softened, but the determination in his eyes remained. "I'm not asking you to resolve everything right now," he replied gently. "I just need to know, do you want me to stay or not?" Tears welled in my eyes as the weight of the decision bore down on me. I wanted to tell him to walk away, to leave and take this unbearable burden with him, but the thought of losing him was too much to bear. "I don't want you to leave," I whispered, my voice barely audible. For a moment he stood frozen, his eyes widening in disbelief. Then, without a word, he closed the distance between us and wrapped me in his arms. It wasn't an embrace filled with romance or intent. It was one of pure comfort, safety, and mutual understanding. "We'll figure this out together," he murmured softly, one step at a time. The days that followed were a mixture of solace and anxiety. Ethan and I became hyper-aware of how our interactions might appear to others, treading carefully around family and friends. At the same time, we found ways to steal moments for ourselves where we could speak freely without the weight of secrecy. But our fragile peace wasn't built to last. Secrets have a way of surfacing, and ours was no exception. One evening, while Ethan and I were quietly talking on the back porch, Our cousin Chloe appeared unexpectedly. We froze, startled and unsure of how much she'd overheard. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Nothing," I replied hastily, too quickly. Chloe wasn't naive. She scrutinized us both, her piercing gaze taking in every detail. "You two have been acting strange for weeks," she said bluntly. "Don't tell me it's nothing." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "We've just been spending more time together. That's all," I said, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, and that's what's weird," Chloe countered. "You two were never this close before. What changed?" Panic surged through me. Chloe was the last person we wanted to suspect anything. She was sharp, direct, and never afraid to call people out. "Nothing changed," I insisted, forcing a laugh. "We're just getting along better these days." Though she didn't seem convinced, she let the matter drop for now. Later that night, Ethan and I sat in my room, the tension between us almost unbearable. "She knows something's up," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "We'll handle it," Ethan assured me. "How?" I demanded, my voice cracking under the strain. "This is already hard enough without someone snooping around. What if she figures it out? What if she tells someone?" "We'll figure it out," he said firmly, his resolve unshaken. "But I'm not walking away just because things are getting complicated." His determination provided a small measure of comfort, but it couldn't quell the fear gnawing at me. Chloe was perceptive, relentless, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she started asking more questions. The walls seemed to close in around us, the weight of our secret growing heavier by the day. Ethan and I had made our choice, but the question lingered: could we survive the consequences of that decision?